I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy roundtable, fantasy roundtable, yeah. Fantasy roundtable, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy roundtable, fantasy roundtable, woo. Fantasy roundtable, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. We have survived Thanksgiving and we've almost survived the entire week of games on Thanksgiving weekend. Just one really wonderful game to go tonight. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts clashing in what's going to be a huge game that has huge playoff. Oh, wait, no, neither of those teams are probably going to the playoffs. Well, Dennis, how was Thanksgiving? How was your weekend?
No, I had a pretty good weekend. Turkey was delicious. You know, my wife doesn't understand I'm not that big a fan of ham, and she just keeps cooking ham because she seems to think I like it, but the boys eat it. So, hey, I don't mind it the next day, you know, chopping it up, throwing it in some eggs and some hash browns, making some burritos. That's how I like my ham. But no, I had a fantastic weekend. Lots of football. Ohio State got their butts kicked. You know, we got to do some stuff there. You know, we let our defense played poorly. I think, as I mentioned it to somebody on Twitter, we had a terrible plan and we executed it poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Michigan might win, but that was quite a bit.
You just can't give up 4 75-plus yard touchdowns and expect to win.
No, well, it's fitting as we turn to the Sunday schedule. Another team that knows a little something about quitting on the field, and that would be the Denver Broncos, who rolled down to Carolina, were Vegas betting favorites probably for the last time this season, and lost at 23-10. Dennis, I know the Texans technically have a worse record, but is it possible the Broncos are the worst team in the NFL?
You know what I like is how you put this right at the top of the rundown so we could just get past it.
You just got to rip the Band-Aid off sometimes.
You just so you don't sit here in the show just waiting for it to come up, dreading talking about it. Just go for it. Get it out of the way. You know, friend, it's not looking good. They look bad. And they've got a good defense by and large. But the offense is so bad. I think I saw a stat today that they're averaging 1.3 touchdowns per game, which is the lowest since somebody averaged 1.1 touchdowns per game.
I think it's the lowest points per game total from what I saw since the 2001 Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, could be. It's, you know, at least they're not going winless like my beloved Lions and Browns have in the recent past. But I think it's all Sierra's fault.
I tell you that week 3, 11-10 Sunday Night Football victory over the 49ers looks more like a unicorn outlier as time goes by. On the flip side, you know, we've seen PJ Walker, we've seen Baker Mayfield, which I did appreciate the stat that they said Jacoby Brissett could throw his next 200 passes into Lake Erie and still have a higher QB rating than Baker Mayfield this season. But we finally got to see Sam Darnold make his 2022 debut on Sunday, and he didn't look half bad. 11 for 1,964 yards and a touchdown passing. Also had a rushing touchdown. Should it be Darnold's team the rest of the season, keeping in mind that Carolina suddenly is back in the playoff hunt?
You know, I don't know if it should be the rest of the season. I think you play Darnold until he shits the bed. You know, Wilkes said he's going to be the quarterback coming out of the bye. But I don't think we need to get ahead of ourselves. He only threw 19 passes for 164 yards. I mean, the rushing touchdown kind of makes it like a Marcus Mariota light kind of performance. I mean, he's a sub 60% completion rate for his career with a 55 to 52 touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, he did accomplish fantasy mission number 1, get the ball to DJ Moore. So, he has good chemistry with Moore. I think if he can do that, it opens up the running game for Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. They've got a couple other ancillary receivers that can help out a little bit, but it's DJ Moore. Get the ball to him. The defense isn't very good. They're probably not going to win a lot of games, but they just got to play hard and show heart. And I think it might give Steve Wilkes an actual shot at getting the job.
Yeah, I guess we will see. I do agree that Sam Darnold should be the one that gets at least another crack after how he looked. On to Cleveland, where the Browns got the 23-17 overtime victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kind of a little bit of a surprise in Jacoby Brissett's probably last hurrah as a starter. But I want to start with the Buccaneers. It's been an odd season for the Buccaneers. None more so than for Mike Evans, who's been kind of Mr. Reliable, getting 1,000 yards. So far, only 51 receptions, 702 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. That's probably the most shocking part. He has had 27 touchdowns in the first 2 seasons with Tom Brady. Only 3 so far this season. What's going on with Mike Evans?
That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. He had 9 targets yesterday, 161 air yards. According to Ian Harditz of PFF. So the opportunity is there. They just didn't convert yesterday, and that's sometimes the way it goes with a big downfield, low catch rate target. And that's what Mike Evans is. He's a contested catch player, and, at 161 air yards, if he converts 4 of 9, it could have been 79 yards, 80 yards, and a touchdown instead of, 29 yards or 31 yards, whatever it was, in 2 catches. So I'm not fretting over Mike Evans. I think you just you go into the Mike Evans experience expecting a couple games like this each year. So it's, there'll be some squawking in practice probably. And next week they'll come out and Mike Evans will get the ball and all will be right with the world and everybody will move on. I think he's still on pace for.
Yeah, they have 6 games left. All he needs to do is average 50 yards a game. So he can still make it. I was happy to see Chris Godwin getting back on track. That did a lot of my fantasy teams some good yesterday. On the flip side, for the Browns, they're now sitting at 4-7. Watson got cleared, and by all accounts, is going to start on Sunday against the Texans. We've seen Baltimore offense kind of waffling. They've come back to the pack a little. We've seen Cincinnati be a little up and down. Do the Browns still have a chance?
They got a puncher's chance, I think. But, let's not get sideways here. They're 4-7. With 6 games left to go, I think they would have to win out to make the playoffs. I feel like it's going to take Watson a couple games to get his feet under him. And unless he can play defense, I don't think it looks good. They've given up a league-leading 25.6 fantasy points to running backs this year. They cannot stop the run. I think they're going to have a new defensive coordinator next year. Some people are calling for Stefanski's head. I think with the whole Watson situation being out 11 games, I don't think Stefanski has anything to worry about. But I do think we're getting a new defensive coordinator in Cleveland next year. So, like I said, unless he plays defense, I don't think they're making the playoffs.
We'll head down to Tennessee, where we got a matchup that has a lot of playoff ramifications. That's the Cincinnati Bengals came in to battle the Tennessee Titans, got the 20-16 win. That moved Cincinnati back to 7-4 in a record tie with the Ravens, and knocked the Titans back a little bit. The Titans still plenty of space between them and their nearest competitor in the AFC South. But for the Bengals, it was touch and go this week about whether Jamar Chase was going to make his on-field return. Got ruled out a little bit later in the week, but we saw another fantastic game from T. Higgins, 7 receptions, 114 yards, and a touchdown. Dennis, can T. Higgins keep producing at this level even when Chase comes back?
So, referring back to my preseason rankings, I had Chase and Higgins as top 12 wide receivers. I mean, is anybody in Miami going, can Jalen Waddle still be a top 12 wide receiver with Tyreek Hill here? And I think Joe Burrow is as an effective a passer as Tua Tagovailoa. I think the numbers bear out that Higgins does well with Chase in the lineup. You know, Burrow doesn't do that. Not often does Burrow do the old Devontae Adams target hog thing. Burrow throws it to the open guy, or in times of tight coverage all around, the openest guy. You know, he's not afraid to throw it into a tight window, whether it's to whether it's to Chase, Higgins, Boyd, Hayden Hurst. Burrow's not afraid to tuck it in there in a tight window. And so I think Higgins will be just fine.
On the flip side, you know, I mentioned Tennessee has plenty of good space left to win their division. That doesn't seem to be in doubt. But this is another time this season, you know, their 4 losses, they lost to the Giants, who've turned out to be a decent team, but then they lost to the Bills. Pretty embarrassing kind of game there. They lost to the Chiefs, and here they lose to the Bengals. It seems like they have struggled when they've played more cream of the crop teams. You know, their wins have come Raiders, Colts, Commanders, Texans, Broncos, Packers. Can they be real AFC contenders the way they're built, or are they just kind of a team that can win its division and get to the playoffs?
I feel like they're a team that can win its division and get to the playoffs. You know, they're a team that they fight to keep it close in the fourth quarter and see if they can pull it out. They got Derrick Henry, Treylon Burks is coming on, Robert Woods and Nick Westbrook-Akini are playing okay, and they've got a pretty good defense. So their whole goal is to try to keep it close enough that the last team with the ball wins, and they can be the last team with the ball. They win ugly, and it's a grinded out team, very much in the image of Mike Vrabel. And honestly, they're ahead of where I thought they would be this year. Because they're winning the games they should, and that's really all you can do. When you're favored, you should win, and if they do that, they're going to end up winning their division and putting themselves in the playoff. But I don't think they go deep in the playoffs. They may be a 1-and-out.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. They're probably going to end up, a 3rd or 4th seed. I wouldn't be surprised with how good the wild card field potentially is if they get knocked out in that round. On to Miami, where the Miami Dolphins cruised to a 30-15 win over the Houston Texans in a game that really wasn't that close.
Am I the only one who heard the "Welcome to Miami" in their head when you said that?
We got another team that made a quarterback change this week. We got the Kyle Allen experience, 26 of 39, 215 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. Made up a little bit of his day during what I would consider garbage time when he was competing against Skylar Thompson. But was Kyle Allen really an improvement over what we've seen with Davis Mills?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Kyle Allen experience was something, wasn't it? Overall, they just have a lack of weapons on offense and defense. They're in a rebuild. Kyle Allen, I don't think he's any different than Davis Mills was. He may be a couple years older, and that's really the biggest difference between the two of them. honestly, it looks like an opportunity to see which guy is going to back up your rookie next year. So we've seen Davis Mills for a season and a half. Now let's take a look at Kyle Allen. Would we rather have him be our number two? Would we rather have Davis Mills be our number two? And that's really, I think, what these quarterbacks are playing for in Houston. But it wouldn't surprise me, too, if they jettisoned both of them and brought in more of a veteran presence to play behind either Stroud or Young, whichever one it is they decide to go get.
On the flip side, when Raheem Mostert got ruled out, there was a lot of people really pumping up Jeff Wilson, and it makes sense because the Texans have been horrendous at stopping the run, and yet Jeff Wilson and Myles Gaskin combined for 19 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. That was kind of it on Sunday. Are you surprised they didn't run the ball better or more?
I'm probably surprised they didn't run it more. I think it's a situation where with more volume, the numbers would have looked different. And, as the game wears on, but, maybe it's a situation where they just, they were ahead. The passing game was working as the Miami game plan does. Mostert is the explosive back in that offense. And with him being out, I think that left them maybe a little bit of grinding with Gaskin and Wilson. Mostert breaks off a play here and there, but he's not going to run away from. Wilson breaks off a play here and there, but he's not going to run away from people like Mostert does. And the Dolphins' game is really built on they pass to set up the run, and it just ended up that it wasn't a real high volume game. But yeah, I think if they'd have ran the ball more than 19 times with those guys, the numbers would have continued to improve as the game went on.
Moving on to the New York Jets, which got the 31-10 win over the Chicago Bears. They made their own quarterback change. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, looking at the Bears, we got word today Darnell Mooney is now out for the season. So that's going to put even more focus on Chase Claypool. And Chase Claypool, they traded for him. He's got 4 games in now. His 2 receptions for 51 yards on Sunday marks his best performance as a Bear. He had 2 for 13 in his first game, 1 for 8 his second game, 2 for 11 his third game, and then 2 for 51. No touchdowns, and that's pretty much all we've seen from Claypool. So, Dennis, what do you make of Claypool with the Bears so far? What should the expectations be?
Well, I think the expectation will be that he should be the guy getting most of the volume over Equanimeous St. Brown and Byron Pringle and Dante Pettis. But the team as a whole isn't a strong passing team to begin with. I mean, Claypool, the last 3 games, 3 games ago, 31% of the snaps, 42% of the snaps, 67% this last game. I think he also, you got to give him he's getting used to the playbook, learning the playbook better. And as long as he can continue to improve in that aspect and get on the same page with his quarterback, whomever it may be, it's going to just help to propel him into next year. The draft capital they spent on him tells you they expect him to be around and they expect him to be an integral part of the offense. Mooney was the top dog there. We've got 6 games now to kind of watch and see, can Claypool establish himself as the 1B? Can he play the 1A the rest of the season? How will it propel him into next year? Because the rest of the guys there are a bunch of Jags, long and short of it. And so he has an opportunity here now to establish himself. We'll see what happens with Justin Fields and his shoulder. If they decide, well, Mooney's gone, we're going to shut Fields down for a while too, and then they get 3 more games in, and it's like, oh well, we're what are they? How many wins they got? 4?
They got 3 wins.
3,
4. No, 3 wins. Yeah.
3 games from now, they're 3-13 or something like that, or 3-10. They may just decide, let's get our quarterback healthy in the offseason, look ahead there. So I think Claypool will be fine. He's got to continue to learn, get the reps in the offense, and he's going to have a prime opportunity to do it now.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about Claypool. I liked the trade for both the team and the player. I thought he got out of the shadow of a couple of other guys in Pittsburgh and has a chance. I actually think he has a chance to potentially be the wide receiver one there. Right. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be this year. I also think the Bears have plenty of other problems that they need to hopefully solve by throwing money and draft capital at it this offseason. On the flip side, Zach Wilson got benched midweek and replaced with Mike White. White comes in 22-28, 315 yards, 3 touchdowns. Seems to remember that Garrett Wilson and, more importantly, Elijah Moore still exist. Dennis, what did you think of Mike White, and do you think he should hold the job?
I think he should hold the job, but I think our expectations need to be in line with what we've seen from Mike White historically. And if you remember last year, he come out of the gate smoking in his first game. That's when he became a fan favorite. And then he proceeded to end up with the one of the highest interception percentages of any quarterback in the NFL last year. So, he's not a there's a reason he was either drafted where he was or was an undrafted free agent. I don't remember which because it wasn't.
I think he was undrafted. I think you're right about that.
He there's a reason guys go undrafted. You don't see a lot of guys that, ascend to the Tom Brady level from the back of the draft or the free agent pool. Does it happen?
Oh, he was you're right. He was a 5th round draft pick by the Dallas Cowboys.
So, that's a little bit better, but still, a lot of 5th round picks at the quarterback position don't pan out to be anything. And so I like White. He did what he should have, and it looked like he's good for fantasy. But I just have I have reservations about the long-term prospects. He feels like a career backup. He feels, I don't want to say a Colt McCoy because I felt McCoy kind of got the shaft at a starting opportunity. Maybe a Charlie Whitehurst or one of these guys that just Chase Daniel.
One of those reminds me of a Taylor Heineke though. You almost talk yourself into it. I'm with you. I feel like I'm almost going to talk myself into it after a couple of games, and then he's going to play like the Bills or the Dolphins or something and get obliterated.
Yeah, be 11 for 36 with 119 yards and 4 interceptions.
Yeah, I think it's more of an indictment of Zach Wilson than it is high praise for Mike White.
I was listening to Sirius XM earlier today, and somebody on there was saying they felt one of the hosts might have been Michael Fabiano, I think, said that he expects that Wilson's gone from the team after this year. That when Wilson couldn't execute the simplest things in the interview, and then you pair it with how he's been playing, that the lack of leadership, that he'd been losing the locker room and he completely lost it, and that he can't make it up. And Robert Saleh is in the situation that if he goes back to White, then he loses the locker room. And so he said he felt like Zach Wilson's getting traded this offseason.
Well, and through it all, if the playoffs started today, the New York Jets would be in the playoffs. So it's been an amazing turn.
Like Joe Flacco starts, got him hanging on.
I know. Going to Washington, the Commanders held on to a 19-13 win over the Atlanta Falcons. Commanders moved to 7-5. We'll get to them in a minute. Falcons are 5-7 now. They have one of those Week 13 buys. They're technically only a half game out of first place, but we've seen them fading down the last few weeks. Do you think they're done as a playoff contender?
Yeah, I feel like they're done, but then when I kind of took a look at where they were, they've scored the 10th most points per game in the NFL. So now they give up more points. They give up the 4th most points. And so it's a situation where if they want to be successful, they have to lose the games they lose by, more than 7 points. And then that way that'll allow them to win a bunch of close games based on the points for, points against averages they have. I get that they're fighting, but they just don't have enough talent all around. It was kind of a stick in the eye of fantasy managers to watch Kyle Pitts play all year, and then as soon as he goes on IR, the tight ends start catching passes and touchdowns and whatnot. But I think the team just needs another year of building. They need to keep infusing some free agents, some draft capital with some talent, and most of all, a quarterback. But I'm also a proponent. You build from the inside out, add the top level quarterback when you have the team just about ready to go. That gives you that 5-year window with that high level quarterback that's not making a ton of money that cripples you in the salary cap. So,
and I kind of I think we'd even think about the Falcons a little bit differently if they would have lost the game that they should have lost. The first time they played the Carolina Panthers, there was that weird penalty against DJ Moore after he caught the touchdown that negated the kick. If they would have lost that game, you're looking at them being 4-8 and the Panthers being 5-7, and that might be a more accurate reflection of the way the teams are playing right now. I would like to get a look at Desmond Ridder. I mean, I think Atlanta could be a 6, 7, or 8 win team right now the way they're playing, but that's not really going to get them anywhere. I almost think they'd be better off kind of acknowledging where they seem to be slipping and getting Ridder a look, but we'll see if that happens. On the flip side, for the Commanders, we saw probably Brian Robinson's best game of the season. 18 rushes for 105 yards, caught 2 passes for 20 yards and a touchdown. Do you think he's getting stronger as he goes through this season?
Well, he missed the first few games, and then when he did start playing, he eased into it. So theoretically, he's, hasn't taken the beating of a lot of guys at this point in the season. He looked pretty good yesterday. But Atlanta gives up, I was saying Atlanta gives up the 10th most fantasy points to running backs. And Washington runs the ball the 8th most in the NFL at 30 times per game. So it seemed like a stylistic match made in heaven for Brian Robinson. And then when you throw into it that touchdown pass that he caught, he looked good on that. So he's got the opportunity. I do think he's not explosive like Gibson, but he's the grinder. And Ron Rivera has decided that that's how he wants to run that offense. He's going to let Antonio Gibson be the change of pace. He's going to let Brian Robinson be the hammer. And whoever happens to be in there when they pass the ball, that's who's going to get the targets.
Yeah, it is interesting to see Robinson getting some receptions now because we know McKissick is on IR. We'll move over to Jacksonville, where the Jaguars surprisingly got the 28-27 win over the Baltimore Ravens. Dennis, the Ravens have not scored over 30 points since week 3 of the NFL season. We've seen them kind of struggle to find an identity in the backfield and in the receiving game outside of Mark Andrews. Should we be a little concerned, or the Ravens kind of, we talked about Tennessee being a team that might be good enough to get to the playoffs, but not really good enough to compete? Could the same be said of Baltimore?
I think so. They activated J.K. Dobbins from not activated. They designated him for return. They got the 3 weeks to decide to add him to the roster. But I think for as good a drafter as Ozzie Newsome has been over the years, they completely mismanaged their wide receiver core. I understand getting rid of Hollywood Brown. He didn't want to be there. They didn't want him to be a cancer. They were kind of going in another direction. But the Rashad Bateman injury seems to have really crippled their passing game. And to not be able to have found a consistent solution to that, I think really is an issue for that team. I would put them in the same league as the Titans, where they're likely to, if they make, I honestly, I think if they make the playoffs, it's going to be as a wild card because I think Cincinnati wins the division. But if they get in, I don't know how deep they're going to go. I don't think they go very deep at all.
Yeah, I almost feel like, as weird as it seems to say, Tennessee might have a better offense because at least they have some passing prospects with Woods and Burks, and they definitely know what they're doing with their running game.
Yeah.
I feel Baltimore almost is right back in that situation. If something happened to Lamar Jackson, I don't know what would happen to this team. On the flip side, for the Jaguars, Travis Etienne got injured and came out of the game. I haven't heard a long-term update. I don't know if you saw one today.
They said that actually he was cleared to go back into the game. They just played it conservative.
Well, we saw Jermichael Hasty get some more work, who didn't do a lot on the ground, 12 carries, 28 yards, but did catch 5 passes for 67 and a touchdown. If Etienne isn't able to go, how do you feel about Jermichael Hasty?
I don't think he's going to get the rushing volume that Etienne did. And so I think it comes down to when will they be comfortable activating Darrell Henderson and what does Snoop Connor bring to the table? So without Etienne, I think it ends up being kind of a 3-headed monster with Etienne leading the way in touches, or not Etienne, Hasty leading the way in touches. But we've also seen Darrell Henderson is good for about 3 games a season at 20 to 22 touches. Now he's going to need a week or 2 off after that. That's just how he's built. But I would expect Hasty to be the guy, and they've got a decent passing game. Lawrence played the best game of his career, I think. Zay Jones has been delivering. Marvin Jones, Christian Kirk throughout the season has delivered the goods, but he's had a couple up and down games lately. So they do have a pretty good offense, even without Travis Etienne. But I feel like Etienne's going to be in next week. He's going to be fine. It wasn't the foot that had the Liz Frank injury last year that he injured this week. So I would expect, with all the news we've heard so far, being that it wasn't a big deal. He was, they were just being cautious, and he was cleared. He could have came back into the game if they felt they needed him. You got to roll with that because that's what the coaches say. Now he could watch him not play for 3 weeks.
It's kind of interesting because that was a very competitive game. Speaking of competitive games, we got some actually fun games in the afternoon window, one of those being the Los Angeles Chargers and the Arizona Cardinals. Chargers win 25-24 after going for 2 after scoring the potential tying touchdown. They got that 2-point conversion, got the 1-point win, and moved to 6-5 on the season. The Cardinals, meanwhile, dropping to 5-7. For the Chargers, Mike Williams held out. We don't know, how we've seen it can take a little while to come back from those high ankle sprains. Just ask Keenan Allen's fan base. We've seen Josh Palmer do pretty well, but yesterday we saw DeAndre Carter pick it up, 7 for 73 and a touchdown. How are you feeling about Carter?
The Chargers have one of the deepest wide receiver groups in the NFL. Well, I think Cincy probably has the best top 3. I think the Chargers might have the best top 4. DeAndre Carter is their wide receiver 4. When called upon this season, he has been delivering time after time after time. I think that right now you have to be careful because Everett is also a guy that gets a decent amount of targets. So with 3 wide receivers, Everett and Austin Eckler had 15 targets yesterday. So I don't know.
Caught him some 11 passes.
I don't know how, I have an 12-0 team that has Josh Jacobs on it.
Oh, lovely.
I crush my opponent. He needs 165 points from someone in tonight, Michael Pittman tonight, to beat me.
It doesn't feel likely.
No. But they only ran the ball 9 times, not counting Herbert scrambles. And I don't know. I feel like they need to be a little bit more balanced than that. it just seems like, they got behind 10-0. Then they came back and took a lead. But man, just to abandon, if we know they're going to abandon the run game like that, then man, I'm all in on all of their passing game targets. Because heck, even so Everett was 4 for 18, not great. But Keenan had 5 for 49 and a touchdown.
Everett also caught the 2-point conversion,
Yep.
I think. So for fantasy, it gooses you up.
And Palmer was 5 for 56, along with Eckler and Carter. So I'm good with Carter in the flex spot. I think that him and Palmer, I'm probably more comfortable with them as flexes, and Keenan as a higher end flex, maybe a low end too. But I think you can roll all three of them out there. And I think Mike Williams is going to be out at least 3 more weeks.
I mean, they probably shouldn't have tried to play him last week.
They should not have tried to play him.
On the flip side, for the first time all season, and actually for the Cardinals, we got to see Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins on the field together. Brown caught 6 for 46, Hopkins 4 for 87, and a touchdown. What did you think of the pair of them there in Arizona?
I think it's about what we expected from them. I feel like I would have expected probably the bigger yardage from Hollywood Brown, the bigger YPA. I mean, Hopkins had almost a 22 yards per catch average versus Brown, who, let's see, about 8 yards per catch. So to me, I would have felt like that would be a little bit more reversed. But also, I know DeAndre Hopkins is a stud, and I think Marquise Brown will be fine. He's going to have to, I think, get back into shape a little bit, but they didn't hesitate to use him. And with James Conner pumping in 25 carries for 120 yards, it really helped to balance out the Kyler Murray maybe making some poor decisions.
Yeah, Connor's running better and catching passes. Who would have thought now that Arizona has pretty much worked themselves out of the playoff race? We'll move on to Seattle, where the Seahawks lost a stunner 40-34 to the Las Vegas Raiders. Dennis, on a day where Zamir White averaged 14 yards per carry and Amir Abdullah caught 3 passes for 39 yards and a touchdown, how could we ignore the simple contribution of one Josh Jacobs, who just got 33 carries for 229 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the game winner, and also caught 6 passes for 74 yards. What did you think of his big day?
Man, like I just mentioned, I have him on my lone undefeated team, and it was phenomenal. So, yeah, he was questionable with a calf pregame. And so there were a lot of scrambles to pick up Zamir White in redraft, just in case, to hedge your bets.
I mean, he looked good in the 2 carries he got.
Right. But man, Jacobs is playing his ass off this year. He is pissed off that they didn't give him the 5th-year option. And he's like saying, look, of all the players that Mike Mayock and John Gruden drafted, I'm the one that you should have given the option to. And here's why. And he's putting it out there. Now, my big concern is that going into next year, he's going to there's going to be some negative regression to his game. Now, I will say I did make a trade for him today, which I thought it was a fair market trade. I've got a team that is in the playoff hunt, currently in 5th place. I'm looking good to make the playoffs. And I get Jamar Chase back on that team this week. But I'm one of the lowest scorers of the playoff teams. And I felt like for the next 6 games, I think I can use Josh Jacobs. My running backs are Dameon Pierce, Jeff Wilson, and Kareem Hunt.
Dameon Pierce, the Texans are just
Yeah,
obliterated him.
And I traded for him. I traded a first-round pick for him earlier this year. But I traded my 24 first and a second, a mid-23 second for Josh Jacobs. And I think that's fair value. And I think he's gonna get a chance to be a starter somewhere next year. I just worry.
I was going to ask you, do you think the Raiders will have to eat it and try to re-sign him?
You had Josh McDaniel as your head coach. What do you think he's going to do? Honestly, I don't think he's going to re-sign him.
If the Raiders are really cash poor, as all the reports seem to indicate, I think they won't be able to match what they're going to do. But I do think they erred in that they could have had him locked up for another year. For a fifth-year rookie, it's a chunk of change, but it's not an unsurmountable chunk of change. I think they're probably looking back on that as being one of the biggest blunders of this new administration.
I would agree. I mean, I think he's going to be fine the rest of this year. My biggest concern is his easiest game is next week against the Chargers. They are, I think, bottom 8 in giving up points to running backs. But 3 of the 5 games he has left for the regular season and fantasy playoffs, 3 of the teams are top 8 in fewest points given up to running backs, with 2 of those games being against the teams that are currently ranked 1 and 2. So it's not going to be easy, but he doesn't have competition there. Unless he gets injured, he's going to get the ball. He's going to be the running back in that offense, and he's shown he can catch the ball well. That was something that everybody was like, John Gruden, what the hell are you doing? Throw the ball to Josh Jacobs. He can catch the ball. McDaniel's like, okay, you can catch the ball. Here you go. So I think it'll be fine. We'll see.
On the other side for Seattle, they slumped to 6-5. They started really strong, but we've seen them kind of fading a little bit of late. If the playoffs started today, they actually would not be in the field due to the Commanders having played one more game and having that kind of half game up on them. How do you feel about the Seahawks playoff chances?
I think they're fringe playoff. They got to win some games. It feels to me like the team they're battling is the Giants. And in part because I'm just not sure Washington is really that good. It's just more that they've played the extra game. But the Giants are the one that, they're coming back down to earth now that they're playing a little bit more challenging part of their schedule. And so to me, I feel like that last playoff spot is kind of going to go to one of these 2 teams in the NFC.
Yeah. A couple weeks ago, I thought they would for sure make the playoffs, but now I think there is a reasonable possibility that all of the teams from the NFC East make the playoffs. The Commanders have looked a lot better than I thought they were at the beginning of the season. But the Giants, you have a fair point. They have 2 against the Eagles, one more, I think, against the Cowboys, and they haven't looked great against good teams. Speaking about not looking great, not just against good teams, but against any team, welcome to Rams 2022 season. They go to Kansas City and lose 26-10 in a game that actually was less of a blowout than I expected. Matthew Stafford still in the concussion protocol, no lock to play this week. We saw Bryce Perkins get the start. 13 of 23, 100 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, carried the ball 9 times for 44 yards. No Cooper Kupp, no Allen Robinson. I don't know if he was his best lineup of weapons to throw to, but what did you think about Bryce Perkins?
So Bryce Perkins is a 25-year-old one-read mobile quarterback.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
So unless they literally build an offense where it's read or run, I think he's going to be a backup. He plays hard. He's got good size, 6'3", 215, and a decent arm. I just don't know that he has the experience. I mean, he was in college for 5 years, and the systems he played in there aren't known for preparing quarterbacks to play the pro game. he's got some tools. I think he might develop into a reasonable backup quarterback. But there's a reason he was behind John Wolford. And I think, looking at how this game turned out, 13 for 23, they kind of tried to hide him, only 100 yards passing. Now, they didn't do a great job hiding him, only rushing the ball 19 times with their running backs, but they mostly didn't have a lot of offensive plays. So,
or a lot of offensive players.
Right. Can he improve? Yeah, he can improve, but I don't know that he's got a very high ceiling.
That Christmas Day game between the Rams and the Broncos is really going to be something. I hope you are by your TV at 2:30 p.m. on Christmas Day.
Yeah, maybe that'll get flexed to,
Yeah. Well, after a lot of talk this week that Ronald Jones not only got activated but was going to be the starter, he rolled out there for 4 carries for 12 yards and 1 catch for 22 yards. And the Chiefs today promptly signed Melvin Gordon. So how are we feeling about Ronald Jones in his debut?
He caught a pass.
Even a blind squirrel, Dennis.
Even a blind squirrel. That's what my grandpa says. So, this is the first game Jones was active all season. And he was only active because Edwards-Helaire was out. And seems like, they didn't run the ball at all with McKinnon. They basically ground it out with Isaiah Pacheco and let Mahomes throw the ball 42 times. And by let Mahomes, I say let the best quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, top 2, do what he does, which is play quarterback. So, the clock's ticking on Jones. He's going to be practice squad roster fodder for the next couple of years before he bounces completely out of the league. Maybe he lands in the XFL next year, the USFL, where he can get some actual playing time. But I don't see it there.
Someday we're going to stop getting automatically excited when a player signs with the Chiefs. In the last game of the afternoon window, the San Francisco 49ers hosted the New Orleans Saints and shut them out 13-0. Dennis, how are you feeling about Alvin Kamara down the stretch? Obviously has a late bye this week. We've seen him kind of struggling to get production of late despite getting touches. 7 carries for 13 yards on Sunday, granted a tough defense. 6 catches for 37 yards. Is he still an RB1?
He's potential. He has the potential to be an RB1. I think he still has the skill set to be an RB1. But all in all, he's not a 20 carry guy. They've used him in that role the last couple of years, and it really hampered his pass catching ability, which is where he makes his money. He's a change of pace runner that is an outstanding pass catcher. And so the last couple of years, as the offense has struggled, he has been miscast into a role that he doesn't really excel that much in. I think as much as I've enjoyed the Andy Dalton ride, I think we're coming to the end of it. Now, granted, the 49ers have a stout defense, and a lot of teams have opportunities while playing the 49ers. So to be surprised that they were shut out, yeah, I think I would have thought they'd score. To be surprised that they were beaten by the 49ers, not really.
I am a little bit with you. Like, they're 4-8. They're not out of it, but they're teetering on the edge. I think you do let Jameis Winston get another shot. He brought up, to me, a fair criticism of it's very rare and has only happened a few times where a guy loses their starting job because they get injured. He hasn't had the greatest tenure in New Orleans, but he probably deserves a shot to see. I thought they were doing well with Andy for a few weeks, but we're kind of back to not a lot going on.
Yep.
On the other side, Christian McCaffrey, we know he has all the upside in the world. The question has been a little bit with all the mouths to feed in San Francisco volume. 11 carries, 32 yards yesterday, caught 4 for 17. No touchdowns. That hurts. Elijah Mitchell out 8 to 10 weeks, which, unless I'm bad at math, probably means the entire season.
Right.
What do you think of McCaffrey's upside going down the stretch?
Well, there's a lot of upside with him because he's just so talented. I'm probably more concerned with them coming out and saying he's having some knee soreness, which could be problematic. We may be in for some Jordan Mason shares on the rise. If you're playing Jock Market or Mojo or one of those things, it may be time to maybe see if you can buy cheap on Jordan Mason and turn it for a profit here. But man, Christian McCaffrey is one of the best running backs in the game, and he can run the ball inside. Outstanding pass catcher. I think Kyle Shanahan is probably going to try to limit the hits he has to handle. And so for me, all the explosion and all the upside is there, but there is going to be some concern that they cap his productivity.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there's not without risk, but very few players offer you the kind of upside he does. We've seen it once already with the 49ers when he had a receiving touchdown, a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown the same game. I think you have to – all four of those 49ers assets right now, McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo, I feel like you got to play them, and you're not always going to get incredible results. The Sunday night game ended up being more competitive and a lot more high scoring than I was expecting, as the Eagles held on for the 40-33 win over the Green Bay Packers. Dennis, the Packers have now fallen to 4-8 on the season. Aaron Rodgers left this game late in the game with an injury. Thought he might have punctured a lung. They're checking to see if he broke some ribs. We got to look at Jordan Love. He came in and was not bad. 6 of 9, 113 yards, a touchdown. Seemed to have a pretty good command of the offense. The Packers seem to have kind of put themselves in a position where it's going to be nearly impossible to make the playoffs. Is it time to get a look at Jordan Love?
Rodgers said that he's playing as long as they're not mathematically eliminated. But man, Jordan Love looked good. He looked, when you think back to last season and how fish out of water he looked, man, he looked bad. There may be something to this whole let a guy sit for a year or two and actually learn how to play quarterback in the NFL if he has the tools. I like what Love did yesterday. He was mobile. He made nice throws. Christian Watson is delivering the goods. And I think that somebody was drawing a parallel about something when I don't remember if it was when Brett Favre took over or when Aaron Rodgers took over, but it was because of an injury to the veteran. And
I think that is how Rodgers took over from Favre.
Right. And so, they were drawing a parallel there. The downside of it is that unless Rodgers just decides, hey, I'm done, I'm good, they're on the hook for a whole lot of money, and it's going to make him hard to deal, and they're going to have to eat a ton of dead cap if they just move on. But yeah, I wouldn't mind getting a look at Love with them being where they are, but they've got several veterans. I think Bakhtari is coming to the end. I think Aaron Jones is going to be moving on here. I know he signed a short extension, but they've got a lot of guys. I think that they're trying to do a not tear it down kind of rebuild. And with Rodgers' salary, his contract, I think that's going to be a bit prohibitive for them to kind of do that. I think they're going to have a real down year before they bounce back.
It might almost be the best thing for them if Rodgers has some broken ribs and needs to sit from a minute, because it'd be nice to get This is another team, kind of like when I was talking about Atlanta. It'd be nice for them to get a look to see what their option is, because that's, I know, the big fear. You don't want to go into anything blind. Just ask Broncos fans. On the flip side, for the Eagles, 2 weeks ago they lost to the Commanders on Monday night. Last week they had to go to the very edge to come back against the Colts. They got pushed pretty hard by a 4-8 Packers team. Did last night's win make you feel better or worse about the 10-win Eagles?
I mean, are we sensing a primetime jinx on the Eagles? No.
Well, that Colts game wasn't primetime.
No. I think where we're at right now, so we're 10, 12 games into the season. There's a lot of tape on the Eagles this year now, where they've improved over last year, how other teams are approaching what the Eagles do, and teams are starting to build better plans against the Eagles. So the games are being a little more competitive, and you're not, by and large, you're not going to go undefeated in the NFL. It very, very rarely happens. So losing a game or two or three is not necessarily that big a deal. I think the Eagles are a really, really good team. Miles Sanders had a phenomenal game yesterday. The rest of the passing game, Devontae Smith looked pretty good. A.J. Brown with a touchdown. Quez Watkins with a touchdown. But hell, I mean, Jalen Hurts only threw for 153 yards.
He didn't need to. They ran for over 300 yards.
They did. So, their defense didn't play as good as I would have expected, but they're also playing against Aaron Rodgers, who's one of the all-time greats and a Hall of Fame quarterback, and is going to make some things happen. The running game, I think it felt like the Eagles got a little wrapped up in saying, we got to stop Aaron Rodgers, and that allowed Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon to kind of do some work too.
Yeah, good teams go through all kinds of things, and I still like the Packers roster and talent, and so I don't make a ton of that. I'll be curious. So this is their closing stretch. They're home against the Titans, which right now looks like a division winner playoff team. See how they play. They're at the Giants, which is right now the Giants are in the playoff mix. They're at a Bears team that's been putting some offense together. Is Fields going to play? Will they look? But the Bears have a pretty spotty defense, so you would expect the Eagles would be able to shred them. Then the third road game in a row is Christmas Eve at the Cowboys. I think that's going to be a pretty stout test. And then they finish up at home against the Saints, which we talked about, a team that's still battling, and the Giants. They're going to get some good tests, and ultimately it comes down to winning. I know there's been some talk, are they the Pittsburgh Steelers from a couple of years ago where, the Steelers were like 12-0 and then kind of faded a little bit down the stretch and got blown out in the playoffs. I think the Eagles are better than that. And I think they're also a team that doesn't have a ton of players there together that has a track record of winning together. And, sometimes you need to go through some of these growing pains. It's probably better they're going through the growing pains during winnable games in the regular season than during the playoffs. I still think they're going to end up making a pretty deep playoff run myself.
Yeah, I think they hold on to the 1 seed.
Well, that'll do it for us today. As I mentioned, there is one more game tonight, and that is the Steelers at the Colts. I picked the Colts on when I guess we did our previews on Wednesday, and I believe you did as well, Dennis.
I think so.
I'm not heavily invested in this game. If you're searching for a Monday night miracle, I wish you the best. Yeah. I hope Jonathan Taylor is the one that you're pinning your hopes to.
But it's Taylor, Pittman, maybe some George Pickens.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect from this game. But Matt and I should be back on Wednesday talking about this game, and then the Thursday night game, which, if I recall, was a decent matchup, but I don't remember what it is. Week 13, we do return to bye weeks, and I believe we have 6 teams on a bye, including the Packers and most of the NFC South. Did you look up Thursday?
Patriots Thursday night.
That is a very good game. So
Cardinals, Panthers on a bye.
Those are the only two teams on a bye?
Yep.
So are the Falcons and aren't. I felt like there was.
The Falcons play the Steelers.
Oof. Do we have week 14 buys this year?
Yes, we do.
Oh my gosh.
We-
I thought this was the last week for buys. Now I'm even sadder.
Falcons, Packers, Saints, Bears, Colts, and Commanders in week 14.
Oy. All right. Well, something to look forward to.
Yeah, hopefully you don't need that last week victory to get you in.
Thank you, NFL. Well, Dennis, the people might have a few extra moments during the quiet moments of tonight's game. What do you think they should do?
They should go rate us. They should review us. That stuff helps us to be relevant. Hey, do you know we rank pretty well in England, Great Britain, England? I forget which it is. I look unchartable. But rate, review. Hell, leave us a comment. We'd love to talk to you. Let us know what's going on. Listen to the show. Tell us where we're wrong. Celebrate us when we're right, because we don't usually remember that because we're focused on beating ourselves up about being wrong. But those rates and reviews really help.
Wait, you're saying we're right on occasion?